Mi gente, I've got the perfect freebie for you. So I just dropped a 17-page workbook to help you get your mind right, especially in this climate of so much uncertainty. So if you are an aspiring or current entrepreneur and you're just feeling stuck, you're not feeling too good about what the future holds, and all the turmoil, the politics, all of it is just throwing you off your game, this workbook is actually going to act as a journal for you. It covers goal setting, efficiency tips, how to manage your time, financial management tips, strategies on how to wrap your head around the next big thing that's coming down the pipeline to bring you consistent revenue in your business. It covers what you should be doubling down on in terms of your well-being. And it is just my favorite jam-packed journal full of marketing and sales strategy to help you get clarity, but most importantly, to help you secure the big bag. So make sure to tap on the link in the show notes. I've linked it there so that you guys can get really clear on the top hacks that you can put into play in 2024 to set yourself up for success. I hope you love it.
Incredibly lucky and privileged to be able to also raise oversubscribed rounds so far.
It's incredible. $185 billion potential is no small feat.
I was unapologetically me. Oh, don't worry. Like, I'm going to get you that interview or that recommendation or that whatever.
You've entered into the space with this level of not knowing and not being tainted from knowing.
Right. I think
and
it's
which
better.
Have served to your advantage.
We're going to bring you some tamales to your house, and maybe you can tell us how we break into the business. You know, it's this, instead of saying, oh my God, I'm the only woman here, I'm the only Latina, I'm the only person of color. As I'm in my 50s, I'm excited with knowing that I have the power to open doors for others.
What's up, mi gente? Welcome back to Banking on Cultura, where we discuss and celebrate the vibrancy and complexity of Latino culture, entrepreneurship, and of course, all the bonchinche in between. Now, today's guest has been on my vision board for quite some time. I've been wanting to meet this woman literally for years. And once I read her bio, you guys are going to get the vibe as to why. And once you get to learn more about her, I promise you, you will become a fangirl just like me. So let's get into it. She is an entrepreneur, cultural strategist, and social advocate. She has raised over $55 million for her ventures, establishing herself as a beacon of Latino entrepreneurial excellence. We love that here on Banking on Cultura. Her current venture, Suma Wealth, harnesses a $182 billion potential. Catering to young U.S. Latinos, Suma Wealth is an innovative fintech platform providing financial tools and cultural education. Beatriz is also a philanthropist leading the Acevedo Foundation in the U.S. with an emphasis on economic empowerment for emerging Latino entrepreneurs. Without further ado, welcome Beatriz Acevedo.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Really
I am so pumped to have you here.
Thank you so much.
From the West Coast in New York City.
All the way from LA in New York. So.
I love it. I love it. So we love to open the show with some bonchinche.
Okay.
So give us something that we cannot Google about you.
Oh my gosh, something you cannot Google about me. I started, if you Google my true career, I started in radio when I was 8 because I was super in love with Menudo and with Ricky Martin, and I thought I would marry him if I went into radio. But that I think people can Google. But the thing that you cannot Google is that I started my real side hustle from radio. I had a second side hustle at 8, which was making pies and cookies. So I'm a really good cook and baker. And I would, after school, sell pies and cookies in my dad's building where he had his office. And so I would save up to be able to afford like all the cool stuff of the moment of the 70s, like the Nike tennis shoes and Jordache jeans that my mom was like, there's no way in hell we're going to be buying $40 jeans for an 8-year-old. So I hustled very hard after school, doing my baking. I think that's something few people know about me.
So where does that come from? 8 years old, radio personality. Like, how does that happen?
Well, definitely privilege. So I'm going to straight out say it because somebody was like, well, somebody must have, giving you that opportunity. And yes, my dad had a friend who owned a radio station. and they were holding auditions for kids for this show called La Hora Menuda.
In Mexico.
In Mexico. And there were a lot of other kids who their parents knew the owner. So I guess we all got the call, and other kids in general. And I got selected. So that was great. I guess after that, you still have to be good. But that first chance definitely came that way, at least to get my foot in the door to be able to audition with thousands of other girls my age or older than me. And I was terrible. That's the other thing that's super important to say. I was a super shy girl, mortified to be, to speak. And I would practice after school for hours. I had this mirror in my room, and I'd be like, son las 4 de la tarde con 20 minutos en XBG 1550, but I say it over and over again, and I'd be like shaking and mortified. So I wasn't a natural, there was this guy who is amazing and is still around called Marco Antonio Regil, and he was a natural. Like, he was just so good, so talented. Like, he was born with that talent. So I love to point that out, because like, if you have passion for something that you want to do, you can absolutely do it. Might take you a little longer than somebody who's born with a talent. But for me, like, talent versus passion, I mean, if you have talent, that's amazing. But if you don't, and you do have passion, I'm a firm believer and like an example that you could really do anything in life. Now I have the privilege of speaking all over the world. And I could have never imagined that when I was a kid, when I was just like mortified to, say the name of a song or the time on the radio.
So you said you came from privilege. So what does that mean?
No, I mean, the privilege of my dad knowing the owner of the radio station. Should he not known him, I don't know. I mean, if I would have even known that these auditions were happening, that, somebody makes a call. So there's always somebody who opens a door for you. And I think that that he got me the job. No, I still had to audition, and there were still hundreds of girls. So I still had to have something different than everybody else. But you have to be mindful. Yeah, you have to be mindful that, if somebody opens a door for you, even for an opportunity, not so much for a job, you have to pay it back. So I'm very mindful of that, of sort of like, okay, I had a dad who knew an owner of a radio station, and maybe there were more talented kids than I was, and they never knew that there was an audition happening, and they just didn't get the opportunity. So for everything that I do, I'm mindful that I've been incredibly privileged throughout my career in many things, right? There's very few people that are able as entrepreneurs to raise capital. I'm definitely one of them. There's very few people that have won Emmys. I'm definitely one of them. Doesn't mean that, I lay in my bed and do nothing for it. I mean, I've worked hard, but there's a lot of people who work hard and never get the opportunity. So for me, it's always like, how many doors can I open every single day? I'm very mindful of that, of like, someone gave me different opportunities, and I want to do the same for particularly other Latinas in my community. That's where like my heart, it is definitely with Latinas, who I think are amazing.
We're definitely going to dig into that part. But what I found really interesting about your story is how you've been able to build such a powerful personal brand. So Emmy Award winner, CNN contributor, essentially becoming the face of moving the Latino agenda forward. How did you build this brand? Did you get trained? Did people just practice? Like, how'd you do it?
No, like I know that there are people who have like seminars or boot camps on how you build your person. Like, I would not know how to teach that. Like, I don't get, I don't wake up and think, okay, let me build my personal brand. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't know. I mean, there must be techniques, because I see people teaching seminars on how you build. Maybe I should take one, but
I don't think I
just think like. I think it just happened. I think more than building a personal brand, there's something that I learned recently, and a friend of mine said it to me, and she was like, oh, you have so much social capital, okay, which is very different to me than personal brand. And I was like, oh, okay, Google, what is social capital? And I learned what it was, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? Like, but I did not wait, because she was like, oh, yeah, it's easy for you to raise capital because you have so much social capital. I'm a generous person. Like, my parents taught me to definitely be a giver more than a taker. It's hard for me to ask for help. I'm working on that. So it's very easy for me to give, very hard for me to ask. So I definitely I'm that person that shows up, that will, support you in any way you need, connect you with anybody. Like if it's in my capacity, I will always do it. So I think that whenever, people want to see you succeed, right? People are rooting for you. People, and that's amazing, right? Even when you're talking to investors, they're like, oh, I talked to so many people, and they had only great things to say. And I don't do it for them to only say good things about me. I have flaws like everybody else. But I think that just showing up and being a giver builds that social capital, right? Mm-hmm. Personal brand, I don't know. I mean, you're just who you are and you're authentic and you've been around long enough. I mean, I'm in my 50s, so I've lived many more years than you have. And so I guess it's expected that you've just done more in the additional years that you've been in this earth. And I think also it starts to change when you're older. I would say when I was in my 20s, even in my early 30s, it was all about me, right? It was all about, oh, I want to accomplish this. I want to win this award. I want to be the first to do this. I want to raise this cap. It was in service of the community, but I was very focused of how I did it, how I can move the agenda forward, how I can do this, how I can be the person, writing the op-ed, how I could be. Now it's more like, listen, there's other Latinas who are incredibly talented, who deserve to be in the podcast and in the interviews. And I do a lot of that. I would say more than 50% of their requests, if not more, I pass on to somebody else, right? I'm like, I'm in too many podcasts. I'm in too many, I write too many op-eds. So there's other voices that are super interesting. And I don't think I did that in my 20s or my 30s. I think more starting in my 40s, I was like, okay, my plus one is going to be another Latina at a event that's important and that could be transformational for somebody who's younger, right? That you're making those introductions. Or if I see that there's no Latinas on a panel, I'm like, I have my Excel spreadsheet ready to go to, I'm like, there's thousands of incredible Latinas that you could be have this conversation. So I think that's also changed. And it sounds weird that the more you pass it on to other people in the community, more people sort of like support you, which is counterproductive in a way. I don't know, but I don't know if that's what builds a personal brand or not. I definitely don't think about it. I don't wake up thinking, how do I build a personal brand? I'm just me, and I've been a different me throughout the decades for sure.
Social capital, super important. And there is a technique. So aside from giving, recommending others, are there other strategies that have worked well for you building social capital?
Well, like I said, I never woke up thinking, let me build a strategy to build social capital. I just recently even knew what it meant. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, the only thing I can think of is, show up for others, open as many doors as you can, be authentic. And that's it.
So let's hone in on the giving part. Like, give us examples. So you said you recommend other Latinas to be on panels when you can't make it or your bandwidth doesn't allow. What are other examples of how you're giving back?
So, for example, boards is another place that I'm incredibly privileged to be a part of, which, whether it's boards, raising capital, doing keynotes, all these things, when you go and look like, okay, what's the percentage of Latinas that have that opportunity? It's always like 1%. Yeah. We never pass this ridiculous 1%. So, for example, I gave the example of the interviews. The boards are super, super important, right? And I want to make sure that Latinas are comfortable being on boards. So I usually request to have Latinas as board observers so that I can bring somebody. And I say this to boards that are, super, super important that I'm on. Can I bring an observer as part of something that I do to open doors for Latinas? I want them to know what is a board, what to expect. My first board, I had no idea what to do, what to expect, what to say, how long to speak. It was like horrible. And I just don't want that experience for other Latinas if I can do so board and training is one. Definitely passing on the mic whenever I can for anything that's media related. Sometimes it's hard because they always want the CEO. They always want the founder. So a way around it is to bring somebody else with you, right? So I'll say okay, she's really the we did this at my previous company at Me Too. Like, she's really the engineer leading this part of the development of our product. Like, she's going to talk to you about that, right? So you can't get away from like you not showing up, then bring somebody else, and then you can sort of like let them have their moment and shine. Another thing that I remember doing is any big meeting that you have with like another CEO. I remember there was a time when we had to do a big presentation for L'Oreal, and we were in New York and we were presenting to the CEO. And I was like, okay, well, they want the CEO to the CEO, but I'm like, why don't we bring the Latina who's really in charge of this initiative to pitch to the CEO? And she'd never been to New York, obviously never pitched to a CEO of a company like this. And she was like, no, I can't do it. I'm like, you can do it. Like, we took our time, we practiced, we went over it. I'm like, I'm going to be there with you. You're going to be fine. So it's intentional. It's nothing is by chance that it's not just opening the door like, oh, let me introduce you to my friend. Sure, that's good too. But in things where you're just like, let me literally walk you in, I'll sit next to you, you'll be comfortable, and then you'll be on your own. So I try to do as much as that. Like I said, plus ones on events that are very important. It's not just like, let's come and have some drinks. It's like, okay, these are the people you should meet. Let me make these introductions. This is your target. So very, very intentional on how I'm like connecting them, hopefully for transformational opportunities.
So what is your advice to someone who is seeking an advisor like you, someone who is seeking someone who would provide them those type of intentional opportunities and access? How can somebody connect with an influencer such as yourself?
Well, I'm so terrible to connect with just myself because I'm so busy, right? Yeah. Like, I literally kill myself working, and I do my philanthropy and my charitable stuff and my connections like at nights and at weekends. So if people tell me I want you to be my like personal mentor, like, I don't have that time to devote a lot of time, but I'll have time that I know it's going to be important, and I'll, get along. Some other people do have the time. I know other Latinas like myself that are in incredible positions that have the time and love to do it, and that's amazing. I do so many other things that it's hard for me to have a long time. And I guess, just ask. Like, don't be, I've done mentorship for people who are like, listen, we met you at this conference. We're students. Do you like tamales? We're going to bring you some tamales to your house, and maybe you can tell us how we break into the business. Things like that. I mean, people get very creative, and you can't resist it. But yeah, I think don't be shy to ask. I'm not a good example of that, like I said, because I'm like, yo puedo solita, like I could do it. But the older I get, I think that, I really want to learn, because it gives me a lot of joy to give, but it gives me a lot of anxiety to ask. Now, I do ask, but for others. Okay. So I use my social capital mostly to support. That's why I can always connect anybody, right? Because I'm like, oh, if I know so-and-so, oh, don't worry. Like, I'm going to get you that interview or that recommendation or that whatever, because I tend to use that social capital to connect others. And I guess that just builds it more, because like the universe just gives it back to you. I don't know how it works. So that I'm very comfortable with. But for myself, it gives me a lot of anxiety. So I don't, but I still will give the advice of like, definitely ask, ask and just be honest. Like, this is where I'm in my career. Like, it'd be incredible if I can have this sort of support from you, and start with little things. Like, can we grab a 15-minute call? And then, because sometimes people are like, can I have coffee with you? I'm like, oof. By the time I drive to the coffee, have the coffee, drive back to I'm like, 3 hours is just a big, for the first time. So sometimes just start smaller and then build that relationship. I would think and then have, I end up saying like, oh, let me connect you with so-and-so. Let me send you this. It takes me a little while for people who know me, I'm like, give me a couple weeks and you'll get, I'll make the connections at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, but I'll get there.
Got it. So let's talk about raising millions. So as a woman, as a Latina, when has your credibility been tested, and how have you been able to use your latinidad as a competitive advantage?
Okay, so two very different answers. So I'm going to start with my latinidad, okay? So I had never raised capital until my previous company, Me Too. And I've had other companies, but I bootstrapped them. But this was the first one that really needed a big amount of capital to really because we were the first ones doing anything for Latinos on digital. I mean, Facebook didn't even have video at the time. That's how early we were. And, early investors start to get paranoid of somebody bigger is gonna come behind us and just take your idea. Mm-hmm. So they want you to go. So that's where you sort of need that capital to scale. So I had no idea what to do, what to expect. And it was a very, to this day, it's a big lesson. But the one thing that I did know was that I leaned very, very hard on my latinidad. And I would venture capital is known for not being diverse at all. Mm-hmm. Not gendered, not ethnically, nothing. So I would walk into these rooms, which were really a sea of sameness, right? All the men looked identically the same.
Same suit, same haircut.
Identical. And I'd be so excited, right? I don't think people are excited when they see that, but just, I don't know. I mean, it worked in my advantage. But I would walk in and I my thought process, instead of saying, oh my God, I'm the only woman here, I'm the only Latina, I'm the only person of color, I'm the only so-and-so, I had none of those thoughts. And I guess it also helped me that I was a recent immigrant. So I never heard the data that, we barely get 0.02% of the fund. I knew nothing. So for me, walking into the room, seeing the sea of sameness was yes. I was so excited. I'm I've got this, right? I have no competition here. I am the one Latina that's beyond passionate about what I'm doing and building. And I have so much to say in this room. And I did. So I walked in with a lot of swagger, white man swagger, pero Latina swagger. Mm-hmm. And I'd be Latinos are all the stats that we hear. And these men were just oh my God, with my hands and my hoops and my red lipstick and my eyelashes. And I was unapologetically me, which I don't know. I mean, I read even from a Harvard Business Review article, oh, no, if you use too much your hands and you're this and you don't get a promotion. I'm I have never done that. But also I haven't worked in corporate America since I'm 20 years old. So I don't know, maybe corporate America is mm-hmm. different. But for me, as an entrepreneur, it was amazing. I mean, it was amazing. I am definitely an outlier of being able to raise capital, to raise oversubscribed rounds, which means more capital than what I intended to raise. Up rounds, which, is at a higher valuation than your previous round, because some people, unfortunately, sometimes have to lower their valuation, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I credit that to just being unapologetically me and very, very Latina, and being very proud of the problem I'm solving for my community, really knowing my stats of why we matter, where the market's going. I'm there's nobody more informed, at least in this room, than me. And so you all need to give me your money because I'm the right person to build this company. So that was incredible. The other part of the question of how was I kind of not taken seriously? I don't think that happened in the fundraising side. I think where I had a lot of that was before I became an entrepreneur, when I was a TV personality and I was probably 18, 19, 20 years old and I looked like I was 14. And I would be asking hard questions to Sting or U2 or, and they would be how old are you? I'd be 15. Why? I was so annoyed, but I looked 8. And I was asking about Pinochet and the mothers of the disappeared. And I was so into my political questions. And they'd just be oh my God, who is this kid? Mm-hmm. Right? So that I remember very clearly, being super annoyed and thinking I'm already 15. I would ask the same question to a 15-year-old kid. But back then I just thought, I cannot believe they're not taking me seriously. I don't think in the fundraising process there was ever that. I mean, I was already late 20s. And, a lot of entrepreneurs are college dropouts. So I guess I was in the norm.
Raising capital, where did that skill set come from?
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Ooh, this is really good. You should know about this. So I don't know about you, but I've been known to procrastinate, especially when things scare the hell out of me. The fear alone would have me stuck, overwhelmed, confused, and all types of self-doubt. And don't even get me started on the imposter syndrome. Okay. After getting laid off, not once, but 3 times, honey, I realized that the security blanket that I made up in my head was just an excuse because I didn't really want to bet on myself. The corporate benefits that had me in that headlock, girl, they went out the window once my job decided that they no longer needed me.
Turns out that I'll save a whole nickel if I cut your salary completely.
The truth is, the only security blanket guarantee is the one that you create for yourself. In other words, until you start a business, you will always be at the mercy of a company's headcount, and you will never have complete control over your time, which means you'll be renting out your thought leadership and helping build someone else's dream instead of your own. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Don't you think it's time you stop playing small and tap all the way into your power, sis? Click on the link to learn my 3-step process, the exact 3 steps that I took to make the transition from corporate to entrepreneurship. And this is helpful even if you don't know what type of business to start and have only one source of income. And this is absolutely free. It is my gift to you. I want you to win. It's winning season. In fact, what's that? It smells like winning season. Okay, so tap in and I'll see you inside the training. Let's go! Mi gente, I need your help. Look, the real game behind podcasts is we need to really understand our demo, aka you, our audience, so that when we go out to sponsors who help us put on this amazing show and deliver this content to you, that they can clearly understand who we serve and what is significant to you and what you value. And the only way for us to get that information is for you to give it to us. So we just created this survey. I'll put it in the show notes. It will take you less than 3 minutes, literally, but it will be so helpful for us to get a better understanding of what it is that you care about, what's important to you, what do you value, so that when we're out in these streets trying to secure the big bag and get sponsors for this show, they know exactly who our audience is and what you care about. So we can bring you the best products, we can bring you the best organizations that are out here serving the cultura, the community, you. So please take a moment and fill out the survey. I'll link it in the show notes. Appreciate you.
Nowhere. I mean, okay, I just learned as I went. Now that I think back, I did have my training in a really funny way. My parents, as typical Mexican people, would throw out these carne asadas, right? Like they would just do cookouts and they, always be grilling steaks and people would show up on Sundays at our house, right? You didn't even invite them. They would just come and there were always like rice, beans, carne asada and guacamole, classic Mexicans, and tortillas. And whenever I saw like a big group of people, like after lunch, I would like do some sort of performance, okay? So I'd be like gymnastics. I would put on a little play with like my Snoopy little character, whatever it was. And then I would run into the kitchen and get my mom's tortilla holder, right? And I pass it around like if it was church, okay? like around the people to que cooperaran, like put in some capital here. So when I think back to that, I was like, oh my God, that was like, I was getting my training on like my friends and family rounds of funding. Mm-hmm. Obviously, my mom made me return all the money every time. So I didn't really make any money, but I guess the training started there, but formal training I really didn't have. I remember my first investor meeting, and it was with Peter Chernin, who is this massive executive who really ran Fox for Rupert Murdoch. And when he left Fox and started a fund, he was our first investor. And I remember meeting with him and him asking me if I was raising a Series A. And I was like, oh my God. Like in my mind, I thought, what could possibly come before A? So I was like, yes. And of course I was not raising a Series A, right? Like I should have been like, no, we're raising a pre-seed round. But I had no idea. So
what is the difference? What's the difference between pre-seed and Series A?
It's a very big difference because what people measure you against as far as like, okay, if you're in a pre-seed or in a friends and family even earlier, they're betting on you and your idea. There's nothing more than an idea, okay? Who you are, Are you the right person to solve this problem? Obviously, if you're doing friends and family, it's all on you. Ay, pues mi hija, I believe in her. I'm going to give her some money, or my niece or whatever. But if you're doing already like venture capital, not from friends and family, pre-seed is where you start. And that is like, you can show there's a huge market, there's a huge gap. I have this incredible idea. I have the right team. I'm the right person. And so that's all they look into, okay, to give you money. If you say you're raising a series, and it tends to be, they start to get larger. So series pre-seed, you can raise $500,000. I mean, there's people who've raised hundreds of millions, but that's an outlier. Then after that, seed. Then after that, A, B, C, D, exit, whatever. But every stage, they're expecting you to deliver on something. So a Series A, most companies have already a lot of decent revenue. Some are profitable. They have to have a product. They have to have product market fit, which means like people like your product. So pre-seed series, you're like, okay, the idea and it's you. Once you get into seed, it's like, okay, you have to have revenue, and how much recurring revenue, and at least $1 million in revenue. There's like guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
A, like so many more millions in revenue. How close are you to being profitable? How fast are you growing? Are you doubling your growth and your revenue? So there's guidelines for each stage, and at each stage you raise potentially more and more and more.
Got it.
So if you
and
say
you
A,
go up in letters,
yes,
it's more seasonality, more revenue at that point.
Correct.
Got
more
it.
Traction.
More traction.
More
of
stress.
like a business case, more stress.
More expectations.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
You're not playing games.
Yes.
You're not like, oh, yeah, she's great. I like her idea. It's like, okay, where's the revenue? Okay, where's the growth? Okay, where's the profitability? Like, yeah, it gets, so saying A, when we were really pre-seed, was dumb, right? Because then now they're like, okay, so you got to deliver on all these metrics.
So what happened? You told Peter, right? His name is Peter. You told him. You said, hey, yeah, of course. We're Series A. So what happened when the meeting went on?
Yeah, he was like, great. And I didn't even know how much money we were raising. He was like, are you raising what? Like $5 million? I'm like, yeah, $5 million for a Series A. It's dumb. And and then he was like, all right, I'll fund it. And we were like, oh, okay. And I was such an idiot not knowing that it's really hard to raise capital. So I was like, oh, let me go out and have some other meet, because that's my first meeting. And
how'd you get that meeting?
Because my husband and I used to be in entertainment, and my husband and I were co-founders of this.
And by the way, happy anniversary, just 24 years, right? I saw that, or more than that.
No, it's going to be 25 in August. So I'm getting close. I'm getting close to that.
Congrats.
Yeah, so we knew him from our entertainment days. Fox was exploring launching a cable channel that was just for Latinos, and we went in and took a meeting and presented a project. That never happened at Fox, but like we knew him. So we knew he had a fund. So we're like, oh, let's start with somebody that. So
there was a relationship already there.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it safe to say that you went into this first meeting, there was some social capital already established, so I assume there was some grace given.
Yeah.
But you walked into that meeting not really knowing what you were doing, but you had data and you knew your shit.
Yeah, I knew what I was doing in the company. I just didn't know what I was doing, like what are the letters and what are, the guidelines of raising capital. But, I wasn't the fund manager that needed to know that. That's on them. But yeah, I had no clue. Yeah, definitely safe to say.
Okay. It's interesting because a lot of the stories you shared so far, you've entered into the space with this level of not knowing and not being tainted from knowing.
Right. I think it's better.
Have served to your advantage.
I think it's better. I mean, this go around for this new company, for Suma, I was much more nervous because I knew that Latinas, women over 40, women with accents, like all that plays not in your favor. So I was like, oh God, I have check off every single one of them. It's going to be harder. It's going to be like, I went into with so much more anxiety versus before that. I was just like, oh my God, I've got this. There's nobody like me here. But so you got to keep yourself in check.
That ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's interesting. So that could possibly be a strategy. Like maybe don't get caught up.
Well, I wouldn't say be ignorant.
No, right. Not being ignorant, but if you're exposed to the data and you're aware of the statistics, don't allow that to
correct.
make you feel less than
or to prevent you
from going after it, right?
Well, if you know the data, you definitely should not feel less than, because the data is in our favor. The data as far as like who we are as Latinos, okay? We're the biggest contributors to GDP growth, which is what really matters in a strong economy. It's us. We are the demo that keeps America young, like an aging country, like there's so many in Asia and in Europe, is terrible for that, vibrant economy. We are the demo that sets America to not be so old and aging. So that we have in our favor. Workforce. Latinos will be 80% of the new workers in the next 10 years. I mean, every single number of data that you look into, that data is in our favor. The data that women of color, blah, 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 don't get funding, that's a different other data. But we should know the data of how powerful we are as Latinos. And the Latino Donor Collaborative, led by a really good friend of mine, Ana Valdez, does an incredible job every year putting out this data. If we were a country, if U.S. Latinos were its own country, we'd be the 5th largest economy of the world. And a lot of people are like, oh, we're investing in Brazil and Mexico. And so, and I'm not saying to not do that, but like our GDP is stronger than any of all those countries combined, right? Like it's in your backyard. The opportunity is in your backyard, and it's called U.S. Latinos. And make no mistake, that is the biggest opportunity anybody has, and that is the biggest demo that any company needs to grow. So that data, amazing, know it, recite it, be very proud of it. The data that says, oh, but it's only 0.0001%. It's okay to know it, but then know, well, if somebody did it, I could do it too, right? We could be 2% instead of 1%, adding myself there. But you start to wonder like, oh, it's going to be difficult. Oh, it's going to be this. But, you have to not play those mind games, because that's just not serving.
So let me ask you this, because I'm very aware of the data, our buying power, our purchasing power. We're buying the most online. We're tuning in the most online. Yet, it is still very difficult to get investment, to get the buy-in with all that data. So how have you been able to showcase the data in such a way where people are either it's creating buy-in or they're opening their checkbooks?
I don't know how I do it versus another entrepreneur doing it. I really couldn't tell you, oh, I do this that's completely different. I mean, I'm passionate about the data. I don't know, maybe I scare them that, like, if you don't do this, like, you're going to fail. So everybody should do that. I don't know. I mean, I think that, for example, raising capital for Me Too made a lot of sense for me because I came from media and entertainment, and that was a digital media company. So I'm like, I've done this. I've won the most awards. I've, everything. Like, I am your girl to fund.
So let me...
But...
Go ahead.
But for this venture, which is finance, that is not my background. So I thought people are going to be like, what? Like, who are you to be coming to ask for capital to build a fintech company? So I don't know. Like, my answer would have been different before this company. But with this company, I was still incredibly lucky and privileged to be able to also raise oversubscribed rounds so far. There's no madera here, but you never know. It could be up today and down tomorrow. But as of now,
No, it's incredible. $185 billion potential is no small feat. Let me rephrase the question. So the data is public.
Yeah.
It is known. We have advocates in the space such as yourself who are pounding the table, bringing the data to the attention of decision makers. But companies are still falling behind. They're not hiring us. They're not promoting us to executive roles. They're not investing in our projects. They're not putting us in front of the camera. So how are we able to make the connection? Like, the data's there.
All the examples that you gave are more like on the, not hiring us, not promoting us, not being on the, whatever it is
not
like,
investing
out
in
of
us
your,
también.
yeah, not investing. The other is like, you're like, okay, because they don't do that, I see the opportunity, so I'm going to build it, right? But then your question of like not investing in us, I think like, now there's more capital in hands of diverse fund managers and a lot of Latinos and a lot of Latinas, I have to say. So, when I raised my first round for Suma, it was primarily Latina investors, okay? I did not have to overly explain to them why we mattered, right? They understood what it is to be a financial caregiver for older family members. They were financial caregivers for their parents, like I am. So to them, it was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. This makes sense. So the more time that goes by where we're going to have people like us be in these positions of privilege, whether it's to distribute capital, whether it's to hire you, whether it's to promote you to the C-suite, people like us at the top matter. I mean, that's the reality. Now, it's a question of time to get there, right? Yesterday, I was doing this conference and I had like the two most senior Latinos in two huge financial institutions, Morgan Stanley and Bank of America. A few years back, there wasn't a Latino president at Bank of America. There wasn't a Latina head of private wealth at Morgan Stanley, right? So that's going to start happening more and more and more. And then when you show up and you're like, I want to do a partnership with you. This is who I am. This is who I serve. To them, it's like, we get you. It's personal. So things will get better by default. My thing is, how do I accelerate that, right? How do we push that forward faster? With inertia, it's going to happen. My kids will definitely benefit from 10 more years of them, whether being entrepreneurs or being in corporate America. And their kids will even benefit more, right? We will be the majority. We will be in the C-suite. We will be the CEOs. It just hasn't happened yet. But so my goal in this lifetime is to push that to get us there faster.
The work that you do, huge responsibility. I know that crown is heavy to wear. You said you work all the time, high stress. In this era of soft life, where it's being marketed to us to like, cógelo suave, like calm down a little bit,
anti-hustle
center
culture.
yourself, right? Anti-hustle culture. And given your experience in the space and what you've been able to accomplish, the accolades, the rooms that you've been in, is it worth it?
I think so. I mean, when I had young kids, I questioned myself many times, is it worth it? Without kids, I would say yes. So pre-kids, absolutely. I had nothing else to do but, to build my career, give back.
Live la vida
so I
loca.
love it. Exactly. And now that my kids are in college, like I have a lot of freedom too to, I feel I have not freedom. I had freedom. I've always had freedom, but I feel less guilt, right, to work all the time. So sometimes you question it because you're like, oh, I missed, whatever, a play, or I missed something at school, or I missed that, my daughter lost her first tooth, or whatever it is. Then as you reflect back on that, I mean, there's no going back. So would I do it differently? Would I work less? Maybe. But what's done's done, I think, in an aggregate, it's worth it. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'd had a less hustle culture when I was a young mom. But I can't go back, so.
So what is your advice to a Latina who has the voice, has the potential, has everything in her to really help with the acceleration of moving the community forward? However, she's conflicted with taking on that level of responsibility and all of those sacrifices in order to move the needle forward, with the understanding of knowing how important it is to center your happy, right? And how paramount that is. And just because you have money doesn't mean that you are happy.
No.
So what would be your advice to her if she's kind of going back and forth, conflicted of whether or not she should like put the pedal to the metal, or if she should just cógelo suave and really just center her peace?
Depends on who you are, like and because there's no right answer for everybody, everybody's different. I would just say you have to make your own choice. Like, you can't even, don't take my advice by any means, because you want to know, like, oh, I regret not doing this, or I don't, but it was my decision. I think that's what's really important, right? I do think that there's a lot there with like self-care. I don't know that you can, I don't know. I would love to be anti-hustle culture for sure. And I have so many friends who I see posting and promoting, and I'm like super jealous in a good way. But it depends on who you are, like it depends. Like, I know in my youth, I would have not been happy with tómalo con calma, or whatever you say, tómalo suave. Like that was just not me, That's not my personality. My personality is like, go, go, go. Like I'm excited with a new challenge, a bigger challenge, something, like that was just me in my youth. As I'm in my 50s, I'm excited with knowing that I have the power to open doors for others. So it also changes, right? Like I want to make sure that I can have weekends off. I want to make sure that I can sleep later in and not every day be, when I was in my youth, like at 5 a.m. at the gym and doing this. And I'm not there yet anymore. But things that give me a lot of excitement and pride and keep me going are very different in my 50s and my 40s and my 30s and my 20s. So what's my advice? To really listen and, to your gut. More than you think. Look for the signs of where you have to be. I used to have a coach that would say, like, is that a whole body yes? Right? And I'd be like, what is that? But like, when you're like, say, like, yes, but you're like, but something is not sitting right with you, that's not a whole body yes, right? Like, I was like, are you really loving doing that or not? And then you have to reassess and recalibrate. I have a lot of respect and admiration for younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, like my kids, who have their priorities very straight, what they want. I've been in meetings where I've had team members say, I gotta go because I have a yoga class. I would have never, ever, ever in my life gotten up where my boss was in the middle of a meeting because I had a yoga. But I applaud them. I'd want to be them. I don't tell them don't go to the yoga class. I'm like, wow, that's amazing, right? Now I have in my email something that says, like, not because you're receiving an email from me, you need to respond.
Saw that. Yes,
because I send emails at 2 a.m. and now you can schedule them. So that's better. But sometimes I forget to schedule. I'll get better at that. But for some people, it's like, oh my gosh, that's affecting my mental health, and good for them to have those boundaries. So I respect that. I wasn't that person when I was young. So yeah, there's no one size fits all, I don't think. I think just follow your gut, follow your instinct, follow your passion, and then recheck with yourself, right? What you are doing feeling good to you or not? And there's no rush also. Like, you don't need to kill yourself because you have to get here at this age or at that stage. I had a dad who I adored, but he was very much of like, why not 10? Why not A+? Why not number 1? Why? Like, he wasn't a person who was like, it's okay if you're a B, if you're average, that's good enough. It wasn't good enough. Perfection was good enough. And perfection doesn't exist, right? So you get to a point in your life when you're like, I have a child like that. Who is like, no, it has to be perfect. And I think, oh my gosh, like, he's not going to be that happy, right? And I have another child who is amazing and accomplished and smart, and she's so much happy. She's so much more balanced than this needs to be so perfect and only straight A's and only this. So I'm like, you have to take all those things into consideration. So sorry for not the perfect advice that I gave, but be passionate and be true to yourself and follow your gut and follow your instinct.
That sounds like amazing takeaways to me. But I can see how some would feel pressure understanding the need to have more of us in these executive roles, to have more of us in CEO roles, to have more of us with the decision-making power to say, yes, we're going to invest in this project.
Of course.
So it's kind of like that. Yeah. That kind of like dance.
And once you get there, it's a lot of pressure.
Because,
well, first of all, you don't want to screw up. right? You're the one Latina that was able to do this. And if you screw up, then you screw it up for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are on this board and you're the only Latina, you don't want to be the least prepared. And if you do, so to take it easy once you're there is not that much of an option, unless you don't really care, right? Like, I'm like, God forbid I show up to a place where I'm not overly prepared. Nobody asks me to do that, but I feel that response. I'm like, oh my gosh, as the only Latina, how? And there's a lot of people who say you should not do that. You should not overly prepare. You should not. I'm a Virgo type A, like, and I'm 50. So I'm up from another generation, and I don't think I'm going to change in this lifetime. But I definitely applaud and admire younger generations who are like, I'm good enough, exactly as I am. And that is amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. I remember one time I was in like some sound bath class, and it's the first time I heard the phrase. This is years ago, like, you are enough. And I was sobbing because I was like, oh my, like, I always think that I need to be more, right? And give more, do more, like the expectation of just like, it's exhausting. And that time it was just like, no, like, you are enough. And I was like, oh my God, it hit me. And I know, and now you hear this so often of you are enough. And that's amazing. So yes, don't be like me. Be more Gen Z millennial. And yes, take it easy. When you feel the passion and want to do more, do it because you want to do it. But check in with yourself and make sure, it's a whole body yes.
I love that. Doing. The kids say, F yes. It's an F yes or an F no. You got to make sure you know what it is.
Exactly.
So let's get into the Talk That Talk segment where we tackle something taboo in the cultura, something controversial. And you spoke about privilege. And you Mexicana. And in today's world, a lot of folks like to group us all as Mexicanos. Like, that's how we all are. That's who we are.
And I'm sure it's so annoying. Like, I mean, I'm a Mexicana, but I'm just like, oh my God. Well, do you remember that book, The Social Club? What was it called? I can't believe it. From Elisa Valdez. And she was like, oh, Dirty Girl Social Club, right? And everybody was like, there were Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and Cuba, and everybody asked them, they're like, oh, where can I buy Mexican jumping beans? They're like, I'm not Mexican. Like, it's just like so annoying, I'm sure. But anyway, continue your question. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
So, no. This is great because my question is that privilege that comes with being part of a community who is the most visible of the community. How has that served you? And also, this is a separate but relevant question. How are these silos within the community doing more of a disadvantage to us?
I mean, listen, I was not born in the U.S. I did not grow up in the U.S. So for me, the differences of like not being Mexican came at a much older age, right? Of like, oh, okay, obviously there's other nationalities, but it wasn't obvious until now. And well, even my previous company where it was like, oh, what you guys do is too Mexican. And I was like, what? Like, you just assume, right? You're just like, oh, yeah, the chancla joke and the this abuela. So we started to be mindful of like, oh, wait a second. Like, there's 33 other countries of origin here from Latin America. Like, how are we really serving everybody? It's hard to serve everybody, but at least how are we being the most inclusive? And I think that was the first time when I was like, okay, who are we hiring? Who is writing? Is this going to be well, I'm always asking like, well, how do you call this? How do you say this? Because I'm like, maybe that's not how it's done. So I'm super mindful of that, at least work-wise, right? I definitely love living in LA. There's a lot of Mexicans in LA, but I've lived in other parts of the country. I've lived in Miami, for example, where I was like 25 years ago and full outlier where there's not even cilantro in the supermarket, right? I'm just like, how could live in a place with no cilantro? But
in Miami, there's no cilantro?
No, there's cilantro now. Oh. But before you had to like drive, like at the normal supermarkets, they just did not have anything Mexican. You had to drive, I don't know, an hour to get to some mercadito. But it was just, no, o sea, like you're not the majority. I guess that's the first time that I felt it there. And I think it was a good lesson to just know, okay, like we should be mindful that that's exactly how everybody else who's not Mexican feels when everything is our food, our music, music has been definitely not just Mexican. I mean, obviously between Colombia and Puerto Rico, that's been like the biggest crossover. Now we get some with Mexican music crossing over, and obviously we had it with Selena. But I'm mindful now. I don't think I ever thought about it. But in a place like LA, it's just that continues to be the majority. But for work, I'm definitely mindful of, okay, how are we being inclusive to everyone else? And now with AI, we're doing some really cool stuff because AI lets you do hyper personalization. So the way, we might greet you versus a Mexican versus a Venezuelan is very different. We want you to feel like, oh, it's your abuelita talking to you, and it's going to sound different and it's going to be different. And the things that you grew up hearing or eating or, whatever it is are very different. And we have a lot of commonalities, but the things that are different, we want to make sure that people feel very much seen and heard and that, they're unique to their own backgrounds.
So what is your advice to organizations who are putting us all in the Mexicano group?
Yeah, well, listen, in the Mexicano group, obviously there's other 32 countries of origin, so that's just dumb. Don't do that. And also, aside of that, it's like there's so many differences. Yesterday I was speaking about it. Certainly we're not a monolith. You hear that every time there's an election, but keep it in mind. But, acculturation is different. Whether you're U.S. born or an immigrant is very different. Whether you're English dom or Spanish dom is a huge difference. I mean, there's so many, even if we were all Mexican, we are not, but even if we were all Puerto Rican or Cuban, there would be so many differences in everything else. It's acculturation levels, education, and that is how you target somebody. So the worst thing you can do, obviously, is group everybody into you are this. Yes, there are things that we do that, yes, we all care about family and we all, are enthusiastic when we speak and we all like to have a good time and we are all a collective group of people. We care about others more than self to a fault. All those things. So you can find the commonalities, but never assume that we're the same. Obviously, that's just a big miss. And I do think that technology is going to accelerate how you're able to hyper target people to make them feel like they truly belong as themselves. So I'm excited about using technology for good in that way.
I think the key add-on there is whoever is training the technology and programming technology is actually from the Cultura,
yes,
from the community, not just some random that Google things and is trying to program that technology.
Well, I think that's why AI is better than, obviously AI has not been programmed by us, but you have the opportunity to retrain it, which is something that makes me very excited. Somebody had asked me like, oh, well, I'm like, I was never able to retrain Hollywood in the bias. But I've been able to retrain OpenAI in the bias. At least the first time I asked Midjourney, which is a cool program to make images, to give me a Latina CEO, gave me pretty much a prostitute, right? And I was like, oh my God, like, no. Like, and then I had to really inform now when I ask Latina CEO, that gives me the most spectacular images. So I'm excited that whoever programmed it for the first time might have had the bias, but now that I have an opportunity to retrain it is very exciting to see that, okay, now it knows there's a variation from where we started, right? Mm-hmm. Who is a Latino, who's a Latina CEO, who are first-time home buyers that, don't look like Cheech and Chong. Like, you could not believe what it spit out at the beginning. Yeah, because whoever trained it for the first time had that bias and it wasn't us. Mm-hmm. But at least we have that ability to redo it where we don't have that ability to do it in other places, right? So hopefully that will help.
Well, Beatriz, thank you so much for this super insightful conversation, all the nuggets of wisdom. Please tell the people where they can find you, where they can learn more about Suma Wealth. How can they get involved?
Yeah, so Suma Wealth is super easy, sumawealth.com. That's our website, and it has, where you can download our app and all the educational programs that we have. We have our Dinero Bootcamp, which is amazing. We have that in partnership with Arizona State University. You're able to get a free personal finance certification when you complete it. The course is super easy, fun, even funny. We're launching our Jefa Business Bootcamp in May. That's going to be great for small business owners, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. So that's going to be super fun. All of that you find inside our app in the educational resources. It's all free. Always our education is free. But you're also able to get this coaching and AI find you savings opportunities and, how you optimize your budget and all this stuff. So everything is in our website and it'll point you to the classes, to the app, to all the good stuff. And then for me, and we have socials. We are Suma, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere, Facebook. For me personally, my best place is LinkedIn. That's where I post whatever it is that I'm doing, working on, articles, anything like that. So for anybody who wants to connect, super easy. Beatriz Acevedo on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you making the time because I know how busy you are.
No,
so
no
thank
problem.
you so much. And shout out to all of you for tuning in. I am your host, Victoria Jen Rodriguez, and I'll see you in the next episode. Mi gente, I need your help. Look, the real game behind podcasts is we need to really understand our demo, aka you, our audience, so that when we go out to sponsors who help us put on this amazing show and deliver this content to you, that they can clearly understand who we serve and what is significant to you and what you value. And the only way for us to get that information is for you to give it to us. So we just created this survey. I'll put it in the show notes. It will take you less than 3 minutes, literally, but it will be so helpful for us to get a better understanding of what it is that you care about, what's important to you, what do you value, so that when we're out in these streets trying to secure the big bag and get sponsors for this show, they know exactly who our audience is and what you care about. So we can bring you the best products, we can bring you the best organizations that are out here serving the cultura, the community, you. So please take a moment and fill out the survey. I'll link it in the show notes. Appreciate you.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Ooh, this is really good. You should know about this. So I don't know about you, but I've been known to procrastinate, especially when things scare the hell out of me. The fear alone would have me stuck, overwhelmed, confused, and all types of self-doubt. And don't even get me started on the imposter syndrome. Okay. After getting laid off, not once, but 3 times, honey, I realized that the security blanket that I made up in my head was just an excuse because I didn't really want to bet on myself. The corporate benefits that had me in that headlock, girl, they went out the window once my job decided that they no longer needed me.
Turns out that I'll save a whole nickel if I cut your salary completely.
The truth is, the only security blanket guarantee is the one that you create for yourself. In other words, until you start a business, you will always be at the mercy of a company's headcount, and you will never have complete control over your time, which means you'll be renting out your thought leadership and helping build someone else's dream instead of your own. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Don't you think it's time you stop playing small and tap all the way into your power, sis? Click on the link to learn my 3-step process, the exact 3 steps that I took to make the transition from corporate to entrepreneurship. And this is helpful even if you don't know what type of business to start and have only one source of income. And this is absolutely free. It is my gift to you. I want you to win. It's winning season. In fact, what's that? It smells like winning season. Okay, so tap in and I'll see you inside the training. Let's go! Mi gente, did you enjoy this episode? Are you loving Banking on Cultura? Make sure to subscribe and follow us. Our goal is to grow this community so that we can all embrace our latinidad, secure the big bag, and never question our cultura ever again. Please also take a moment to leave us a review. I love reading your reviews. Let me know what you are thinking, what guests we should have on, and if there are any topics you would like me to cover. I appreciate you so much for being here. Te amo mucho, and I'll check you out in the next episode.